Hi, sixth graders. Welcome. Today we are going to be looking at dividing the Earth into regions and specifically looking at the continents and oceans. So at the top of your guided notes, just write down this learning target. I can identify where continents and oceans are located on a world map. Okay, but let's think about regions before we get to where these things are located. So the world is divided into regions by common characteristics. We talked about this with our 5 themes. And basically it allows us to study the world in smaller chunks. And there's many, many ways of dividing parts of the world. So just jot that down in your notes. We've got these common characteristics and it's just many ways of doing so. One example would be dividing the United States into the different regions. You studied this, I think, in 4th grade. So the Midwest, for example, has some cultural things in common, some of the words that we use, the speech patterns that we have, the climate, that's all in common. But there's these different regions that have those things in common. In Michigan, the Upper Peninsula could be considered a region of Michigan. It's more heavily forested, it's a little bit more rural, there's a lower population compared to the Lower Peninsula, which is more urban or cities and has a bigger population. So just jot down an example of a region that you know about. All right, let's take a look at your map. There's a map of the continents. There are 7, so if you want to add the word 7 in there, you can. And I am just going to show you where these go. You'll write them down on your map, and I've just done them in alphabetical order. So first of all, we've got Africa. It's kind of right in the center here according to this map. Now this map is laid out flat. It doesn't really reflect how the world is, but we'll get into that later. And then secondly, we've got Antarctica. And again, because it's flat, Antarctica looks a lot bigger than it actually is. Asia is this purple here, and in reality, Asia is the biggest continent land-wise. And then we've got Australia down here in the pale yellow, and that's the smallest continent land-wise. And then we've got Europe here, and it sort of looks like Europe and Asia are connected. We'll get into that a little bit later too. And then we've got North America in the gold, and that's where the United States is located, and South America. If you need to pause for a minute to get those spelled correctly and located correctly on your map, go ahead. All right, but what is a continent? So if we think of a continent, they are the Earth's largest land mass. So put that in there. And that makes sense if we look at our map, right? These are pretty big land masses. And that's one way to divide the world into parts. Sometimes people say it's an unbroken landmass surrounded by water, which, works for this. Looks like it works here, but not so much here. So again, these are just geographers have decided this, and they've sort of looked at how these things are broken up. And some of the time, it has to do with politics. So most of these are by water. This is surrounded by water, but this divide here, there's a mountain range here, so it kind of physically divides it, but it's also culturally divided, and geographers have just kind of decided that in this traditional breaking up of the continents and this idea of the 7 continents. And then down here too, like you see these islands, they are connected by these tectonic plates, and so that's why they're considered part of this continent. And then here again is another sort of political divide. It looks like one little island, but the purple goes here with Asia. This yellow here goes with Australia. And again, that's just how geographers have decided that it should go because of politics and culture. So what that boils down to is basically there's many ways to divide the Earth into regions. You could divide it even further from the continents into even more specific regions. Southern Asia shares a lot in common. Eastern Europe has a lot of cultural and political things in common. You could divide it by populations. So this yellow part of the world is 25%. This blue part is another 25%, and you could look at it that way. You could look at it time zones. This is a time zone map. So, what does this band of time zones all have in common, or what patterns are you looking for there? You might do it by economics. So this is more advanced economies, the blue, and then less advanced economies are the red. So again, it's just that depends on the geographer's purpose. So if you put purpose in the blank and realize that regions are human made. Okay, so there's really not a wrong way, and it's to help geographers organize information when we're solving those problems. So you can just jot that down in your notes as well. Now, another thing to help us sort of figure out where we are in the world when we're speaking of world are the oceans. And the oceans really help us kind of with relative location. So you're just again going to label these on your map just so you know where they are. So I've just again gone in alphabetical order. So the Arctic Ocean is in the north. And then there are five. The Atlantic Ocean, which is sort of in between North America here and Africa. And it goes down here too. So South America and Africa, it's all kind of in here. And then we've got the Indian Ocean, which is right in this general area, and India is right here. So it's in between Africa and Asia. And then we've got the Pacific Ocean. Now the Pacific Ocean actually is here, but it's also on this other side of the map here. These really connect, but again, this is flat, but our world is round. So it's a little bit harder to see on the map, but the Pacific Ocean is over here as well. And then the last identified ocean is called the Southern Ocean, and it's obviously in the southern part of our map. Okay, so thinking about what you've learned today about continents and oceans and how we divide the world into regions, if you had a fourth grade friend who just finished their study of regions in the United States, and they came up to you and they said, well, how is the world divided by region? What would you say to them? So kind of think about that, jot down a paragraph, and then share that paragraph with a friend, and then you'll move on to the next activity to help you further be able to locate continents and oceans.